spend a lot of time asking or being asked what it is that you do or that we do with our life. And not talking about the whole, what are you doing with your life, slacker? No. No, like what kind of work do you do? What do you want to be when you grow up, we're asked. Oh, I want to be an engineer. I want to be an astronaut. A teacher. I told them this morning I wanted to be a brain surgeon when I was little. I didn't know what that was, but it sounded fun. But whatever we wanted to be when we grew up, whatever we do now, is very much tied to our identity. And if we can align ourselves just right, we can claim to have a vocation or a calling. We do it when we reflect on other people around us that, oh, they were called to be a chef. They were called to be a teacher or a leader. Or we know someone who just keeps working well past when they should have been relaxing because that work and just working is all they know, and it's so much tied to their identity. They wouldn't know what they would find if they stopped. Now, as we have this new coming of a president and all this stuff talking, we have also get the pastoral perspective from those invited to participate, and we get some sketchy theological messages from some of these folks praying and preaching to our new president. But when it comes, it's not just certain denominations that do it, or traditions. Many of us get caught up in trying to assign God's role into specific areas where God may be working or not working. When you take it too far, it leads to this idol-like state where no criticism is allowed because it was all in God's hand. Or if you go the other way, we end up with the Antichrist, that God is not there, the absence in that position. And then, when you bring this idea of being called, that word can make some pastors a little uneasy too. It's like a trigger word. That in that instant, we have to ramble off our call story. Have you ever been around a seminary and you hear their call story over and over again? It's kind of like a secret handshake to get into the club. The call story is a powerful tool, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it can also reinforce this tie between our doing and our identity in some dangerous ways. Now, some of you have known that between seminary and my journey here, I had a little time of waiting and getting ordained, and that in-between time was a little brutal. I came out of seminary with my identity firmly bound with what I was going to be doing. And then I wasn't doing it. At each step of the process, writing papers to get into seminary, through seminary, and my final essays to get out of seminary, I was always asked about my call to ministry. And then I was wondering if I wasn't called, what did that mean? Or what about what some of you may be feeling, that you don't really like the work that you're doing? Or it's just a job to get through and get some extra money or get by, maybe a little extra pay on the side to have some projects or hobbies. Maybe you struggle to see that direct connection between what you do and what you believe, and wonder, where is my call? Well, since it's the 500th anniversary year of the Reformation, we'll refer to some of the 16th century stuff. Christians at that time were seen as divided into two classes. Those that were spiritual and those that were secular. And there was the Pope and the bishops and all those that wear those fancy clothes. They were ordained, and then there were the laity, the rest of the folks. But then Luther argued that all those blessings that those people up there put out into the world, and their little dresses that they wear, they didn't make them any more spiritual than being another person. They were indeed people that were called to be pastors, chosen among to just bring order to this whole thing, but that no one should regard us as anything else than ministers of Christ and dispensers of the mysteries of God, as Luther put it. No, all Christians, baptized Christians, and priests are spiritual in the sight of God. The priesthood of all believers. This is important as we begin to separate our doing from our identity. Because our calling is less about what we do than it is about who we are. God's call isn't simply to do something, but rather to be something. To be a child of God. It is in this being that leads to and makes the doing possible. It was John the Baptist's intentional time to be and to listen and to respond to God's call, which made it possible for him to proclaim his coming Messiah, to challenge the powers that be all the way to his imprisonment. And what about these folks fishing along the shore, sitting in the boats? Peter, Andrew, James, John. They received a call to be more than they'd ever imagined. I'm guessing they had no clue what Jesus was talking about when he said, "Come be fishers of people." But they knew that Jesus saw something in them. Jesus saw value and worth. They have no idea where they will go, what they'll do, but they know that Jesus is calling them to be his disciples. And for some odd reason, they trust that the rest will become clear in time. They'll come to discover that they are disciples as they go and learn to catch up all kinds of people in this net of God's grace. Drop your nets. Close the laptop. Set down the wrench. Step out of the meeting for a little bit. Pause all that you're doing and follow me, Jesus says. You are called to be children of God. Called to be children of God. God values and honors and loves them. And God values and loves and honors you. How does that feel? Does it feel good? It feels pretty good. Does it feel kind of hokey? Does it feel refreshing? Or maybe a little uncomfortable? Sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable when someone tells you that God loves you. Well, we are open to being God's children. And when we do that, we can learn over time what that means. And in that learning, it will lead us to all kinds of things that we can do in response to God's call. And maybe that doing that comes out of God's call is through your work. Or maybe through a volunteer opportunity. But most of the doing that we will and do is living out our call and living out that baptismal call of word and deed. All of that doing comes in the relationships that we have. How we listen. How we speak to and about others. How we treat one another. But however it is that God may use us, it's important to remember that before God calls us to do anything, God calls us to be something. God's beloved children. When we know this, when we trust in this, the rest will follow. And we don't let it stop at an individual level. Because the calling isn't just for individuals, it's for an entire community of faith as well. For all that we do as a congregation. The refugees we might help, the lunches that we make, the diapers we wrap. We need to be reminded and remind each other who we are called to be and what we are called to be. Called to be this place of gathering of God's beloved children, a place of welcome and acceptance, a sanctuary to be healed, to be stirred and fed, to hear the good news of this kingdom that has come near. We live in some turbulent times in our country and in the world, where there are so many needs that run great, where concerns are real, and where there is a lot to do. And so we do things. We do anything. We do something to respond to the despair or the rhetoric, or to just respond and get some love and decency out into the world. But if we let that grace-filled identity of being God's beloved children seep into the deepest little parts of ourselves, like Jesus settling in among the people in our reading today, so that those who sat in darkness and that shadow of death could see that light has dawned, then there is little doubt that all the things that we are called to do will continue to become clear. In that time from seminary until arriving here a couple years ago, that time in between allowed me to separate the weight of identity of what I was called to do, to rediscover what God was calling me to be. Without getting that greater vision, I could have easily remained in darkness. But when that burden, when that yoke, when the fear and the anxiety and the paranoia of trying to just do is lifted, then we can rejoice in what God is calling us to be, and those actions of thanksgiving truly shine. That sculptor, Auguste Rodin, you've seen the finger. He's famously known for that. But he said that the main thing in life is to be moved, to love, to hope, to tremble, to live. And that's what I see in these fishermen as they laid down their nets. Jesus' words stirred something deep within them to follow into the unknown. We are called to be God's children, to be the children of God, to be moved, to love, to hope, to tremble, to live, to be cast out into the world, so that through all of who we are and what we do, others may be caught up in God's grace-filled net as well. Amen.